Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you have ADHD, you probably already know the feeling. That sudden, completely overwhelming, I need something sweet right now urge. And hey, if you've ever felt like a total failure because you just couldn't stick to a diet, or you've sat there dealing with crushing guilt after a late-night sugar binge, I really need you to hear this right now. It is not a moral failing. Seriously, it is not a lack of character or willpower. As we're going to see from the fascinating neurobiology we're unpacking today, for the ADHD brain, this whole struggle is actually a fundamental biological mismatch. So ask yourself, why can't you just stop after one eclair or one cookie? Why does taking that single bite feel like it physically flips a switch in your head that completely overrides your logical brain? Well, the answer is actually hiding deep inside your neural architecture. You see, for an ADHD brain, a sugary, highly processed treat isn't just food. It is an overpowering super stimulus that literally hijacks your learning and reward systems. Today, we're going to dive right into the exact mechanics of why this happens. Here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Brain, ADHD, and sugar. 2. Baseline level versus spikes. 3. Why willpower doesn't work. 4. The trap of insulin and stress. 5. Neuroplasticity, rebooting your system. And 6. Healthy dopamine strategy. Section 1, brain, ADHD, and sugar. Whenever we talk about sugar addiction, we absolutely have to talk about dopamine. But here's the really critical part. The dopamine system is actually the only neurotransmitter system in our entire body that is capable of learning. And it does this learning entirely beneath our conscious control, deep down in the midbrain. This means you can form an addiction or a deep attachment to a super stimulus, like processed sugar, without your conscious, logical prefrontal cortex even having a say in the matter. Wild, right? To truly wrap our heads around the stakes here, I want you to consider this massive number, 84 billion. That is roughly the total number of brain cells, or neurons, bouncing around inside your head. It's a vast, incredibly complex network that's responsible for absolutely everything you do, everything you think, and everything you feel. Now contrast that massive network with this tiny, tiny number, 7,000. Out of those 84 billion brain cells, only about 7,000 are dopamine neurons. That's it. It's an incredibly precious, fragile fraction of your brain. And when we constantly bombard these few thousand neurons with the overpowering super stimuli of modern processed foods and refined sugars, well, we easily deplete and burn them out. They're fragile, and frankly, they just aren't built for our modern food environment. Okay, section 2, baseline level versus spikes. Let's look at how this fragile dopamine system actually operates differently in the ADHD brain compared to a neurotypical one. A neurotypical brain generally has a relatively balanced, steady baseline of motivation. When it encounters a reward, it gets a moderate little spike and then comfortably returns to that baseline. But the ADHD brain, it inherently suffers from a naturally low baseline of motivation. To just feel normal or to even get the motivation to initiate an action, the ADHD brain requires massive reward spikes. And this creates an immediate, intense hypersensitivity to anything that can deliver that huge spike. In neurobiology, we call this the difference between tonic and phasic dopamine. Tonic dopamine is that constant background hum of motivation. Phasic dopamine is the explosive spike you get from a sudden reward, like, say, eating a donut. Because the ADHD brain has naturally low tonic dopamine, the emotional and reward centers of the brain are pretty much constantly screaming for massive phasic hits just to feel okay. And refined sugar? It delivers a massive, totally unnatural phasic hit. Which brings us to section 3, why willpower doesn't work. Knowing all of this underlying biology, why in the world do we still tell people to just use their willpower? Relying on your logical brain to fight a deep, screaming midbrain craving is, quite frankly, scientifically destined to fail. I really want you to think about this for a second. Why do your most disciplined, rigid attempts to cut out sugar almost always end in a catastrophic relapse? You know the cycle. You restrict, you fight the urge, you try so hard to be good, and then suddenly, bam, you find yourself standing at the fridge at midnight, completely checked out, just eating everything in sight. This happens because of a phenomenon known as the Ouroboros effect. You know, the ancient symbol of the snake eating its own tail? See, your prefrontal cortex is the logical braking system of your brain. When you use intense willpower to suppress your deep cravings, you're actually generating massive internal stress. And this stress directly drains the energy of that prefrontal cortex. So the harder you fight the craving, the weaker your brakes become, until your prefrontal cortex is just completely exhausted. The result? Your impulsive system takes the wheel entirely, leading to a much, much worse binge. All right, section 4, the trap of insulin and stress. This brings us to a deeply physical aspect of the whole problem: how stress basically tricks the ADHD brain into using sugar as an emotional coping mechanism. We have to trace the biological cascades step by step here. First, when you eat high glycemic foods, we're talking processed carbs or sweets, your body releases a massive spike of insulin to handle all that sugar. But here's what's truly fascinating. Insulin acts as a direct, overpowering trigger for dopamine release in your brain. So the higher the glycemic index, the bigger the insulin spike, and the more explosive the dopamine surge. But because this surge is totally unnatural, it leads to a devastating crash, leaving your receptors completely burned out and your baseline even lower than it was before you took that first bite. Let's put this into perspective. When you experience stress, your dopamine naturally drops. Now, if you use sugar to cope with that stress, sure, you get a temporary artificial spike, but your brain quickly adjusts to this artificial flood by downregulating its receptors. So when that temporary spike fades away, your new baseline is actually lower than where you started. Eating sugar to fix a stress-induced dopamine drop basically shrinks your long-term cognitive flexibility and traps you in this vicious, deepening cycle. But wait, here is section 5, neuroplasticity, rebooting your system. This is the great news. We're shifting gears from the problem to your empowerment, because your brain possesses this incredible ability called neuroplasticity, which means it can physically rewire and heal itself over time if you just give it the right environment. Let's look at the timeline for how that healing actually happens. On day 1 of pulling away from the sugary superstimulus, you stop that artificial flooding of your synapses. By day 14, the brain realizes the flood is over and your signal pathways actually begin rewiring and sprouting brand new connections. And by around day 90, your dopamine baseline physically resets. Your receptors regain their natural sensitivity. You literally just have to endure that initial drop to allow the neuroplasticity to step in and do its repair work. Section 6, healthy dopamine strategy. So how do we actually get to that 90-day mark without relying on that exhausting, failing willpower we talked about earlier? Let's look at some natural strategies to mine for rewards. Here are your tactical rules. First, absolutely zero sugar during stressful events, and we'll touch on exactly why in just a second. Second, extend your clean fasting window. Allowing a clean gap between meals without snacking triggers autophagy, which is basically cellular cleanup, and drastically boosts your receptor sensitivity to healthy, natural rewards. You actually resensitize your brain to find joy in simple things again. And third, actively build alternative dopamine resources. Things like movement, getting sunlight, and completing small, meaningful tasks to naturally support your baseline. Now, if you take away just one single thing from this entire explainer, please let it be this golden rule from the source material. Never use dopamine stimuli in a state of stress. When you're stressed out, your dopamine is low. If you try to treat that stress with a super stimulus like sugar, your brain quickly learns that sugar is the only survival tool for stress. You aren't fixing the problem. You're just cementing that addiction loop deep, deep into your midbrain. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the 7,000 delicate neurons in your midbrain to the trap of insulin spikes and the incredible healing power of your brain's 90-day neuroplastic reset. The science clearly shows that your struggle with impulsivity isn't a lack of character, it's a hijacked baseline. But the best part is, you have the tools to rewire it. Once you protect your fasting windows, detach sugar from stress, and truly allow your neurobiology to heal, who will be in control when your baseline is finally reset?